Good day, fellow adventurers. I'm taken. You just have the best smile. It's been a while. I'm so glad that you're back. Come in. The whetstone is available if that axe needs a new edge. Welcome to Dresden's Tale, episode 56. This is season 3, volume 3, chapter 52, in our highly motivational tale. This is high military fantasy, the kind that needs heroes. Ours is Dresden Fane, a dwarf, a warlock, a man so uncomfortable in his own skin he'll give you a softie. He's a warrior of the Stone Clan, prancing his way across a runway of blood. I'm Lewis Nichols, your speaker of gentle tones, your ticket to dreamland, your teller of the truth, etc., etc. I'm the guy who wrote this thing, a crazy project spanning 2 decades and a whole cartload of Word documents. Thanks to YouTube, I now have a reasonable way to pass it on to you. Are you wondering what you've gotten yourself into? Well, you could go back and listen from the beginning, or you could just ask. Oh, you did. So far, Dresden has escorted some wagons on one desert plain, fought some mongrels, saved a guy from parasites, rode an airborne wagon. Spoiler, it won't be the last time. He fell in love with a frog girl. She died, and he ran away. He's made a lot of friends, but he doesn't necessarily like hanging around with any of them. Now he's on another desert plain, at war with his bunch of meanies, fighting another bunch of meanies. Last episode, he pissed off some people, then fought some other dudes on a mountain trail. His best friend told him she was sexually available to him, but that's pretty normal for horny kelds. That's the culture we're dealing with here. Free love, free death, like a bunch of rabid hippies. Donald, the dear boy, is back in the mix, and we're operating in a fighting group commanded by a human and a minotaur. Don't bother memorizing their names. What can you expect the future to bring? More knee smashing, that's what. We like violence, and we're good at it. In the background, we've got an economic subplot and a little romance between a monkey girl and a reptile guy doing a lot of weird shit. Thankfully, off camera. There's this prophet guy people like talking about. His name's Prater. It's not the kind of prophet where you make money, but the kind where you tell the future. We have some weird tension between clans. I do love my world politics, but it really only matters to us to the extent that it matters to Dresden. Honestly, aren't we just all here looking for a good fight? The best way to do that is to find Dresden. Looks like there's some planning and plotting going on. It's about time somebody thought about a plot in this twisted tale. Here on Vool, it's Ursa's 19th day, 2052 years after the fall.
Tribulations 5, 8, 7. There will be war. There will be peace. Tempest or teapot, we all shall pass. Carry the spear with me, and we shall never part.
Skyfell addressed the assembled warriors. This is a real mission. Track and destroy. A few days ago there was a major skirmish. The Iterians were defeated and the Campbells victorious. If they weren't, we'd probably be back at Fort Roth defending the gate, or retreating through it. The important thing is, some of their force is unaccounted for. Mepios took his turn. It could be anything, skirmishers, scouts, but it's probably the baggage wagons. That's what the divinations say. We're taking a full group, all 30 of you, the whole wing. The intent? Pillage, kill, and capture food and supplies. Then maybe the Campbells will give us a little respect, and along the way, take a little silver for our trouble. The meeting didn't have to end there, but it could have. A few questions and answers possibly could have followed, like maybe, does this mean the whole Iterian invasion is defeated? To which the answer would have been, no, but they're wavering in the Fort Roth zone of control. Instead, they left it for everybody to figure out the strategic situation on their own. There could have been a discussion about permanently securing better supplies. A few of the warriors in the wing had an idea about how to improve their situation. They just needed approval to move forward. Barring that, they might have even talked about tactics. Dresden appreciated the raw, unchecked power of massed, experienced warriors. The problem was, their troop really wasn't that experienced. Even the militias of Agamar went into a fight with some basic planning. Why are you always so damn optimistic? You're building false expectations. Instead, Skyfell and Mepios decided to get into another fight. One of us has to be, Mepios defended himself. According to you, we're all doomed. If the Itarians don't kill us, the Campbells will. Maybe we'd just get more use out of mutual self-sacrifice. You first, she screamed at him. That was 2 days ago. Since then, their stormy relationship only intensified. They fought, they made up, and then they fought again. They're on the outs again, Grace reported. I blame Mepios. He looks at every other woman all the time. Nothing for a stoner. Besides, wasn't it Skyfell that bedded that tall guy? Liz pointed out. The monkey shrugged. It's the trail. Anything goes. Except looking. Liz rolled her eyes. If it falls in your lap, it's one thing, but his come-hither looks invite every woman who gets near, Grace continued. He does have pretty eyes, the Minotaur admitted. They'd been on the trail since just a few hours after the meeting. It was refreshing, despite sleeping on the ground, and they were actually eating better. Horses roamed in small herds. Some were Itarian, others Keld. They didn't care about politics, and they all tasted the same. No one would have preferred horse meat over beef, but they didn't have the option. The bounty of steeds also meant most of the warriors were mounted. Dresden grumbled. This is why you don't frolic on the trail. It just causes problems. If you're not frolicking, what's the point of fighting? Liz gave him a look he couldn't meet. Grace laughed. I just can't believe he used frolic, and I agree with Liz. I'm glad we're all picking teams, but this whole command could fall apart like a wooden shield on a practice field. She called him gullible right in front of everybody. Liz reverted to talking about their commanders. You know, they remind me of Karen and Ding Dong. I should have dinged his damn head. Sad thing is, they're probably around somewhere, fighting together and happy about it, Donald said. Why's that sad? Donald thought about it. I guess just because I never liked him either. He was okay, Ralph stated. Sure, rosy reptile, Liz laughed at him. You loved him plenty. Before he could reply, a shrill whistle cut off the banter. Dresden looked over, spotting Rickard standing on the saddle of his tall Itarian warhorse. The beast was moving at a trot, but the priest of Jessa wasn't disturbed in the least. He had a long spyglass to his eye. 2 miles, one of Skyfell's warriors called out. Her voice was loud, pleasant, and highly trained. Dresden was a solid 100 feet away and heard her like it was in his ear. She gave a series of orders to send their 4 fastest riders ahead and instructed everyone else to stay together. He knew she was relaying orders from their commander, making the feat of skill even more impressive. Despite shorter legs than most, Dresden had no problem coming up to speed on his Moldav sprinter. The quick horse had likely seen as much of the world as he had, and possibly been around more combats. There were a lot of dwarves, gnomes, and brownies in the clans, enough to produce a good supply of saddles suited to their stature. He had no desire to mount one of the bigger steeds, but with the right equipment, it was a possibility. Wagons, Ralph pointed forward. Can't tell how many. They must have poked out beyond that high ground and saw us too late to get back under cover. They're trying to run now. They're scattering, Liz yelled out to be heard over the pounding hooves. Dresden could make out the dust cloud ahead, but little else. It could have been wagons, or maybe a herd of goats. Livestock or enemy wagons. His natural skepticism was confirmed when the 2-mile gap turned into 5 as they started to work their way across the dividing gulch. The better horsemen, and the luckier, got across the rough ground far quicker. Dresden wasn't the last to cross. Some were not just unskilled, but unlucky as well. Coming out onto the flat, his little band pulled back together and accelerated into the chase. On a level field, his sprinter made the wagons look like they were standing still. Left! Left! Dresden couldn't figure out what the command meant until Liz got out ahead of him and cut him off. What? Oh! he saw a band of 5 wagons hunkered down to fight it out. Most of the Kells continued to pursue the wagons still on the run. Dresden drove at the halted Italians, coming close enough to test, but not fully commit. They were protected over a third of their perimeter by a low but sheer ridge, and another third by a dry gulch. "What do we do?" Ralph asked. The attackers came together, Dresden's friends, along with Grace and 5 others. 3 were part of Mepios's group. 2 was Skyfell. There was no clear leader. "How about we circle around and hit him from above?" a warrior said assertively. The others didn't like the idea. "That's dumb. I say we wear him down, a couple feints, bring some force across that low ground. That will give the archers time to get around to the high ground and attack him from above." "That splits us up too badly. We don't even know what they're capable of," the warriors argued. Dresden grunted, listening to the arguments. "Well, then we find out what they're capable of. We push up the middle and see how they push back. If we work in from the right, we'll have cover. Hey, we could talk them down. They leave the wagons and walk out. We get the loot, and they get to live." Dresden gave Donald a dirty look. "I didn't say it. I like your idea." "We're not just here for the loot. I'd rather kill them and come up with nothing," the first warrior stated. "We could lie. Or we could just keep talking about it," one of the warriors complained. "I'm going to see if they've got any veterans with them, or if it's just a bunch of teamsters." Seeing he wasn't the only one tired of talking about it, Dresden led the way towards the enemy. Some rode, others dismounted, but the Kells all moved forward. Dresden tried to keep situational awareness. 2 of the bows sped to the left flank where the ditch lay. As the first Icterian arrow whizzed by, they were getting some cover and beginning to loose their own. With Liz nearby, Dresden brought his mount in close, right up against their defensive arrangement. He had a sort of plan to jump over onto one of the wagons, but the move was contested. He swung awkwardly, clanging off a shield. It seemed like it took forever to bring his pony around to strike another blow. He managed to fight back a human, but another was jabbing at his mount with a spear from underneath the wagon. It was a tough line to crack, but Dresden found out what he needed to know. They didn't have a single hero that could shred them to bloody ribbons. "Fall back!" he cried. His own little troop listened, though Ralph was missing. 2 others came back with him. One was a human named Cormac Ravenwing, and another a Minotaur Dresden had never spoken to. "We're jumping right into the middle," Dresden spoke quickly. "If you've never skiffed before, you're going to feel a little queasy." "Horsemeat's going to feel bad coming back up," Grace said. "Where's Ralph?" Liz asked her. She shrugged. "He said he was going to be the second wave. Let's focus, people. Just fight through it, nausea or not. We're going to be right in the middle of them." "I can't jump that far," the Minotaur admitted. Dresden patted him on the shoulder. "You'll be fine. Now get close." He'd never skiffed such a short distance. The visual effect was more like a flash variant, but without the disorientation. There wasn't even enough time to feel the chill of the astral. Dresden rushed forward, striking an armored spearman in the back. He gave a step, then rushed forward again. This time he engaged a wiry feline that could have been a Tagara, or perhaps something else unique to the Icterian plane. Again, he gave ground, trying to find an enemy that he could drive away from the wagon line to weaken their defenses. Liz took the opposite approach, pushing a wild-haired human forward into her allies on the other side of the wagon before grabbing an armored human by his hair and pulling him forward. Ralph swooped down from the high ground, using his momentum to drive an Icterian bowman to the ground. "Death on the wing!" Dresden came around to see the first man he'd struck still in the fight. He knew his friends were close and attacked without fear. Dresden slammed his mace into the Icterian shield like his intent was to make gravel from a boulder. He struck again and again as the Icterian fended him off, butchering one of his fellow Kells as they fought. On the third swing, his weapon cracked at the impact. On the next, a piece of the head came off completely. The weapon he'd once traded for a pocket space was ruined, leaving him only with a small knife he sometimes used for rough woodwork. The Icterian turned, driving Dresden back in a shield-to-shield push. Liz was there, striking the man with an uppercut, and Grace landed a hammer to the chest. Recovering, Dresden drove at the man's legs, successfully tripping up the better fighter. Prone, he struggled to get loose, but the dwarf was tenacious in his grip. Liz and Grace pummeled him with kicks and overhead blows. The end was near. Then the whole world turned yellow. Ah, shit. Dresden reflexively threw his arm over his face. A boot to the face knocked him loose, but the red glare was worse. He fought to get to his feet, moving back. No one could fight in the blinding hell that was the throbbing passions. What he could do was prepare for the aftermath. Fumbling along, he managed to trip over a body. It wasn't graceful, but it's what he wanted to do. Feeling around, he felt a hilt. As the light returned to normal, he forced himself into action. Warriors, allies, and enemies were all in various states. Some wandered, shaking their heads. He could hear others already returning to blows. Dropping a shield, Dresden got both hands on the bishop's blade and swung it around. He kept it simple, bringing the big weapon over in a wide arc and slamming it into the back of a man in the enemy's leathers. Dresden pulled the long blade back, extricating it from the wound and deepening it at the same time. His screaming victim turned to see who'd killed him, just as Dresden came around from a 360-degree swing strong enough to chop the man's arm off at the elbow. The Itarian fell to his knees, lingered long enough to spit blood, then fell forward in death. Dresden choked up on the sword in a more reasonable stance. The blade was longer than he was tall, so the trick was to turn it into a sort of polearm. He grabbed the blade halfway up and kept the other hand on the hilt. Dresden interrupted Grace's single combat with the Itarian warrior. He didn't think that she would mind, as it looked like she was on the brink of death. He made himself a target by crashing the bastard sword's hilt into a knee. Liz was there, and Ralph with her, denying their enemy one last kill before his certain death. He was the better fighter, but worn down by exhaustion and wounds. Dresden and his friends brought down the Itarian warlord. But it was Grace, back in the game after a quick heal, who landed the final blow, a devastating attack that cracked the heretic's lower spine. With their leader dead, the defensive line broke. The battle was over in one crescendo of brutality. The last 4 Itarians tried to surrender, but Dresden decided, "We're going to have enough trouble getting the wagons moving. No prisoners." He grabbed up a blade and thrust it through the first man's neck. It took 2 hours to bring the wing back together. Dresden was happy they did it in the relative peace of a low overhang. There was a clean pool nearby, and grazing for the horses Rickard brought together. Dresden grouped with Liz and Donald, standing watch out over the arid plain. "Still don't know how there are pools this far out." "Something about elemental nodes," the Aquirta said. "I don't really understand." Dresden thought about pointing out that it wasn't related to the elemental, the astral, or any kind of node. But if he did that, Donald might want more information. Instead, he dug out his most sun-resistant hat and settled in for some quiet time. "How do we split it?" A Tagara warrioress and 5 others huddled around 8 treasure chests, all broken open and bearing their goodness. Liz looked down at Dresden and whispered, "How much do you think it is?" "Do you think we'll even get a cut?" Donald asked. Meanwhile, they all tried to ignore Ralph and Grace working off a post-battle high under a nearby wagon. "Gator ate the X," Dresden grumbled. "What?" Ralph was back. "I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they know either. I don't think they have an executor left to do a proper tally." "Oh, and we'll get a cut," Dresden assured Donald. Liz snorted. "Like they ever did proper tallies anyway." Bepios and Skyfeld joined the crew and gazed love-eyed at each other over the treasure haul. "Whatever you think is best," the human bowed to his Minotaur lover. Everyone was excited as she announced the sizable divisions. Until it was all actually counted out in front of him, Dresden wasn't really ready to believe what he was getting. None of them could have really grasped it. 7,840. For me? Dresden's facial muscles seized up, and he became stone-faced. "This is for all of us, right?" Liz, don't... "Nope, it's yours. They all get their own cut." The ad-lib accountant smiled. She had sent several of the noobs into shock already. Their leaders didn't even try to hide their glee at the six-figure haul. Once again, Skyfell and Mepios retreated to take Ralph and Grace's spot under the wagon. Meanwhile, Dresden was still thinking up something to say. Then he was told, "The rest of this stuff has to go too. Take what you want from these piles before somebody else does." Dresden started slow, giving the stronger warriors a chance to take what they wanted, but most of it wasn't suited for them. They already had nice stuff. First, he took a new hunting knife, then a mildly magical lantern, and a bedroll. It was becoming apparent there was a lot more loot than people to collect it. "Is anybody taking that wagon?" It was Donald that started getting them organized. A full case of arrows and a shield, axes, hammers, bolts of cloth, cooking pots, and boots. It all accumulated into the back of their wagon. "What the fuck are we going to do with all this stuff?" Dresden pondered out loud. It took another hour before they were ready to go. Skyfell giggled, something few Minotaur women could master. "You could get yourself a woman and quit pining over lost love. That's what you could do, my dear. There are plenty of local girls working as whores. Or maybe you could flash a bit of silver and win you one the old-fashioned way." Dropping his gaze, Dresden realized he'd been too loose-lipped talking about Leave. "Right! At least we won't have any trouble spending it. Almost all the shops take coins around here," Ralph reminded him. "I'm sure you'll just send it all back home, though." "Let's just try to keep him away from the bars and taverns," Liz poked fun. I don't know what to do. How would I even send it all back? I heard the Temple of Santha helps out with dispersals." Dresden fidgeted, earnestly worried about the pile of money. Ralph threw his arms in the air, his wings sending dust flying everywhere. "For a big fat fee, they would." Maybe a fee's worth it. I don't want anybody coming back on me for not doing the right thing." Their attention was drawn by Skyfell's whistle, Mepios standing with her. "It's been a pleasure, warriors, but this is as far as we go. We're disbanding the wing. I'm headed for Fort Roth, and I've already spoken with those who are invited to join me." She turned to Mepios and gave him a kiss. "Good luck. You were pretty good on the trail while it lasted." Mepios watched her go, speaking as she got up on the lead wagon. "It's going to be up to each of you what you do. Follow your conscience as far as your clan goes, your money, your next mission. Me, I don't give a shit, but I'm going back to Fort Lassiter, and at some point, I'll reform the group sometime after we get there. Travel with me if you want. It's not a commitment." Liz asked Grace, "You're not going with Skyfell?" The Monquise shook her head in the negative. "Me neither," Ralph said. "And she invited me too, you know." "Yeah, me too," Liz admitted. Dresden smiled slightly. "You're both good fighters. She'd have been lucky to have you." "Aw," Liz groaned. "Well, you are stuck with us. So where are we going?" All right, settle down. Man, they're breaking up the team. I hate to hear that. I was really getting attached to that Sky Girl and the Muppet. Well, at least it sounds like we're keeping our favorites. Did Donald say what he was doing? I didn't hear it. I hope he's going to be okay. Hey, did you guys know that in the original text, only one of these characters is ever mentioned after Dresden eventually leaves Vool? Well, of course you didn't. I haven't told you before, and you guys can't see the original text. It's not available. Once again, this is your chance to influence the future. There's no way future Dresden and Dresden's Tale will remain consistent. You've got favorite characters. I want to hear who they are. Who do you want to see remain important to the show, or just move on? Volume 4 is sort of roughed out, but it could change significantly before it's recorded, so tell me what you think. And place your bets. What about Ralph and Grace? Will Liz and Dresden turn into a thing someday? Maybe Dresden will become a true stoner and just marry them all someday. You guys never like my ideas. Do this stuff. Like, subscribe, share. Like, subscribe, share. Leave a comment to make me smile. Visit my fiction on Amazon for Kindle. Leave a review. More importantly, please remember to have an absolutely wonderful day. See y'all next time.